Today we're going to be talking about the Great Depression. So the Great Depression is a period of low economic activities that range from 1929 to 1939. So it was a whole decade, right? The 1930s. And it started through something called as the Black Friday. Okay, so there was this event called the Black Tuesday, not Friday. So it's Black Tuesday. Okay, this happened on October 29th, 1929. So it happened on October 29th, 1929, and basically on this day, the New York Stock Exchange crashed. The whole price of all the stocks within the New York Stock Exchange basically became half. So let's say the value of New York Stock Exchange. So for some pretext, a stock exchange is where you are able to buy stocks, right? You purchase these stocks through this medium. All right. Now let's say the value of all the stocks, the trading volume is 20 million. Okay, and this is before Black Tuesday. Well, because of Black Tuesday and this unprecedented decrease of the stock prices of half of its original value, the trading volume is no longer 20 million. It's no longer 20 million. It is now going to be $10 million. That's it. That's all the money there is. That means that investors who have collectively invested into the stock market have collectively lost 10 million. Now, of course, individually, it depends on how much money you actually have invested in. Personally, that depends on the amount that you put into the New York Stock Exchange. But in collective or general term, $10 million is gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. And that's because of this unprecedented wave, right? Because again, stocks are not liquefied assets. The amount of money that you get from stock is not determined, right? It depends on the price of each one of the stock's shares, right? It depends on the shares price, right? That's what I'm trying to say. So therefore, you could lose, gain, or remain the same in terms of the amount of money that you spend on the stock. All right. So in this case, you're basically losing out on the $10 million that you had previously before this whole event took place. So this was the direct spark clause. Okay, this was the trigger cause to the Great Depression. Okay, and that's the reason why I started in 1929. But it started a little bit after, I believe. I'm not too fully sure about that. But Black Friday was definitely the direct cause into this plunge of darkness, directly contrasting to the uh, to the events that happened in the Roaring Twenties. Because in the Roaring Twenties, you had a whole period of economical divinity, right? Prosperity. Okay, so now that we understand the Great Depression and the whole significance of it, which was investors lost a lot of money, right? Let's get into the causes and then we can understand a little bit more as to what the Great Depression is all about. So there are five main causes. We'll start off with the first one, and that's going to be easy credit. So there's easy credit. So remember, the Great Depression wasn't just something that dramatically happened. It gradually got worse. There was that dramatic event of half of the New York Stock Exchange basically just going that, right, just vanishing. Of course, there was that dramatic event, but afterwards, it was slow deterioration of the economy. All right, and so if we look at this, we have to look at it in the long term. We have to look at the big picture. So easy credit basically means when this happened before in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, there was good prosperity. There's a good economy, right? In the 1920s, this was after the war, World War One, and therefore financial institutions, specifically banks, gave easy loans. So they gave easy loans. What do I mean by easy loans? Well, they were very easy to obtain. These loans were very accessible. Okay, they didn't really check your credit history or anything that much. They basically gave anyone who wanted a loan, right? Because it was very, very common to pay that loan back because of the fact that everybody was employed, they're making livable wages. It was very easy to give money back, right? So therefore, banks knew that if they make it easier to give a loan, right, to a consumer is more likely to take in the opportunity to get that loan, right, and therefore that bank, right, is going to make more money. How are they going to make more money? Well, a loan charges interest, so it charges interest. So you have to pay the principal amount of the loan. So let's say you wanted to borrow $500. So $500 is going to be borrowed from the bank. Now, the bank is not only going to give you that $500, it's going to want more money back in return, right? It wants this money back think of it as a fee for borrowing their money, right? And it comes in the form of an interest. So think of this as your fee for borrowing money. And let's say in this case, it's $35. So basically, you only get $500 from the bank, but you yourself, from your own money, has to pay that $500 back, right? At a later time, of course, along with an additional fee of $35 in this case, because in this hypothetical scenario, I'm charging $35. So therefore, you can see how a loan can be very risky at times because of the fact that there is this interest element at play. Your money is not your money that you're loaning out is not the exact money you're getting, right? Because let's say you get or you borrow $500, you're not paying back only $500. You're paying back $535 in our hypothetical scenario, and that $35 came from the interest that the bank charges. And this is why the banks were so lenient on the loans, because they really wanted to get that interest. Because when they get that interest, their business, because a bank is a business, right? Their business is going to boom. They'll be able to hire more employees. They'll be able to expand even further in their nation or even international, right? So that interest will give them more capital, more money to spend things. So that's why they made it easier to get loans, because they knew that people will be able to afford that interest due to the high levels of employment and high wages that came from a good economy, because then the businesses made more money, right? Okay, now here's where the issues start to arise, and here's where the red flags really start to come in. So people took advantage of this easy to get credit, right? Credit basically just means loan, right? That's where the term credit card comes from. But anyways, so you have these easy to get loans. So that means that many people were getting these loans. And what were they doing with these loans? They were investing on the margin. So they were investing on the margin. Now, what does this term really mean? Well, it means that they were investing not with their money. So investing into the stock market, right? And they were not investing with their own money. They were actually investing with loaned money. So that's where the margin part is. So margin literally means loaned money. So the whole logic of these people was that they would get this easy to obtain loan. They would use this loan and they would invest its contents into the stock market. So again, going back to our $500 example, we get in $500 from TD, for example. We will take that money and we'll think, it's the roaring 20s. The whole stock market is really huge, right? It's not really huge. It's booming, right? I should say that's a good word. And therefore, let's use this money and let's make it work for ourselves. Because many people didn't have money laying around that they could just invest. So instead, they would use the bank's money. Let's use the bank's money, and then we will invest it into the stock market. So what they did is they took this loan, let's say they got from TD $500, and they put it into the stock market. So now it's within the stock market. They own shares of a company, right? They practically own a very little slice of a company, because that's what a share is. You become a shareholder. You own equity into that company, right? But with that, there also comes risk, because that equity that you own, or that small, tiny little percentage that you own, it can fluctuate. The value of that position can fluctuate. It can go higher, it can go lower, but in the times of the 1920s, it always tend to trend highwards. All right, and that's because, again, higher economic prosperity of the time leading into the Great Depression. So therefore, people had the incentives. People knew that their money will make them more money, right? Because of the fact that historically in the 1920s, the price of things really, the price of stocks were skyrocketing. For example, if you look at General Electrics, right? Excuse me. If you look at their stock, right? In the early 1920s, it was $1.75. Fast forward just a couple of years, and it becomes $11.25. That's a huge jump in price, right? So this just shows that people had the real incentive to invest on the margin, because they knew that's not really that huge of a risk. They're basically guaranteed money back, right? That's what they thought. So therefore, they used their loaned money. Remember, there's interest on this. That's where the risky part is. So they have this loan money plus their due interest, which comes per year. So every year it accumulates. And what they had to do now is they had to take this money that they have, let's say $500, they invest it into the stock market, right? And whatever money they make back, the returns they make back, they will first dedicate to paying back that loan, right? So they'll use the money, right, that they make, and they'll pay back their loan, and then after they pay back their loan, they will have extra money that they can profit, right? So for example, let's say $500. Let's say this was in the 1920s, right, when times were good, and this easy credit type of thing was introduced. Let's say because it's so good, you made $700. Congratulations. You've made $700. So from that $500, you now have $700. Okay? So just saying that, let's say you invested $500 of stock, you now have $700 worth of stock. That means that you've made $200, right? So what you can do is you actually haven't made $200. You've actually made a little bit less than that because you have an interest. Let's say the interest is $20. So in reality, you've made $180, right? And that's because you have to pay that $20 plus your principal amount. So in this whole system, you can see the consumer is happy, the lender is happy, and the bank is also happy because the bank is getting their interest, which is going to help them with their business desires, whatever that is, right? Their desires in business. And the lender is also happy because they've made $180 from doing absolutely nothing. They took out a loan. There's no money that they've invested. It's all the bank's money. They took out a loan of $500 and they put it into an investment, right, into the stock market. The times were good, so it would naturally become higher and higher and it would boom, right? And then that stock became $700. They sold that stock. They made $180 after they pay back their loan. Then they can use that $180 and invest in the stock market. Or they can even go big and take out a higher loan, as like $1,000 loan, and they can keep investing that into the stock market, right? So you can see the logic behind investing on the margin. But this is very, very dangerous because of the fact that the returns on the stock market, people thought that it was guaranteed during this time. People were like, oh, it's basically just going to happen because of the fact that, it's the roaring 20s, right? Economic prosperity. But is not always guaranteed. These returns are not always guaranteed. And people will soon realize that with the Great Depression, right? So, this whole process of investing on the margin is only successful if your stock can make a high return. If it can't make a high return, it's not really worth it, right? And it seems logical, especially like right now if you consider it, if your stock price, let's say for General Electric for example, goes from $1.75 to $11.25, it makes sense for you to invest at $11.25 because it's gonna go up. Look how up it went in a few spans. Who knows how few spans of years? Who knows how high it can go up, right? So people thought of this logic and they're like, okay, let's go ahead. We can't afford to invest into the stock market ourselves. Let's use the bank's money and then we'll pay back the bank whatever money they want, right? The loaned money along with the interest, but we'll make so much money, we'll have a profit left over. And in this example, we had $188 left over after we sold our $700, right? We made $200 revenue, not profit, revenue from the stock market in this hypothetical scenario. But the issue with doing this, again, I will emphasize, is that it can only happen if the stock goes up. If the stock goes down in value, you're in big trouble. And people will soon realize this because that's exactly what the Great Depression did. So if I just erase all of this. So what did the Great Depression do? Well, the Great Depression, as we know, stock market prices went down. So the stock market went down, right? And in the case of General Electric, the value was $11.25 for a stock. It went down to 0.11, 11 cents. So imagine you're on the top of the world. You're going up. Your stock market is going up. You're on the top of the world, right? And you decide to join here, right? The stock market is on the top of the world right now. It's just booming. It just keeps increasing. Right? So you decide to take a risk, you gamble, you're like, you know what, it'll pay off, let's go ahead and take out a loan because we can't afford it, and let's go ahead and invest into General Electric. It'll keep increasing. What happens instead? So you're expecting this to happen, right? Instead, that happens. It goes completely down. It collapses, right? And we can see that 11 cents is nothing compared to the $11.25 per stock that once was the price for General Electric. So all I'm trying to say here is that the stock market collapsed. It went, and because of this fact, many people couldn't pay back their loans because these people, they expected to get a return from the different stocks that they had invested in, but they didn't get that return back, and therefore they now owed the bank money. And that is very, very bad because they can't afford it. They can't afford to pay back the loan that they took out. For example, let's go back to our example of the $500 and 20 cents. $20 interest. So there's our $500 loan and then $20 interest. So this is our loan amount, and this is the interest that we owe as a fee for borrowing the money, right? For the inconvenience of borrowing that money. All right. All right. So, sorry about that. All right. So, so we have this loan and then we have the interest. Okay. Here's what happens. You take the loan, $500. You put it into the New York Stock Exchange, for example. So that money is no longer in your account, or it's no longer liquefied, meaning that it can be spent just in the form that it is, right? $500. You can't spend that money. It's in the New York Stock Exchange. What you would have to do is you'd have to take it out. You'd have to take it out of the New York Stock Exchange, put it into a bank account, and then you can go ahead and spend that money, right? but currently it's in the New York Stock Exchange in the form of stocks. Now, Black Tuesday happened, and then the stock market completely collapsed. So now let's say that $500 current stocks that you had, right, that you had invested, becomes $300. You lost $200 worth of stock. $200 worth of your stock is gone. This money will never reach your bank account ever again because the value of that is gone. So why would New York Stock Exchange pay you the initial $500? That value of the stock is gone now, right? Because of the collapse of the stock exchange and the stock. And therefore, you only have $300. So let's say now you're panicking, right? And you're like, okay, we have $300. Let me take it out now so I'm safe, right? So you take out the $300. So now you have a loan. Okay, you have a loan of $520. Because remember, you have to pay the interest along with that loan, right? But you only have $300. Because remember, you lost money, specifically $200 in the New York Stock Exchange. And then you took out that money from the New York Stock Exchange. So now it's actual money. It's $300, right? It cannot fluctuate. It will stay $300 forever and ever. But the value, the purchase power will obviously deteriorate over time because more money is... The supply of money is always increasing. But anyways, it's $300. It will always take $300. So, what do you do now? Because you have to pay $520. So if we do basic math here, you have $520 that you must pay, and then you have only $300 left. From your loan, right? Because your whole loan you put into the New York Stock Exchange. So you have to pay from your own money. Because remember, the whole idea of investing on the margin was that you don't have to put in any of your own money. Many people just couldn't afford to put in their own money, so that's why they even resorted to a loan in the first place. But now they fell into the dilemma of paying money from themselves. Money that they personally have because of the fact that the New York Stock Exchange just didn't perform well. And that money, in our hypothetical example, is $220. Many people did not have that money, and therefore they could not pay back their loans. So now you have this predicament where you just couldn't pay back your loan. And therefore what the banks would do is they would start repossessing stuff. Meaning they would start taking properties and like assets that you have. So this could be clothes, your car, your house, your clothing, right? Anything that had monetary value, it was taken away from you. And that led to the suffering of many people because then many people would become homeless, right? And then they would, they'd have to rely on government assistance, which again would strain the economy even more because the taxpayer dollar is not going to other important relief funds, right? It's going right into these other relief funds for these struggling peoples, which is of course important, but that leads to more economic strain. All right. So again, from all of this, all I'm trying to say is that you had these loans, right, which they used to pay into the stock market. Stock market did horribly well. They have to pay this loan back, not with the returns from the stock that they initially expected. Because investing on the margin means you never put in money of your own. What happens is the loans goes to the stocks, right? And then the stocks will make a lot of money, and the returns from that stock will be sent into the loans, right, to pay back the loans. But you don't have any returns. You, in fact, have losses, right? So now you have to use your own money to pay back that loan. And many people simply just couldn't afford it. Because if they could afford it, why would they even go into loans in the first place? They have enough money to buy that loan, right? So, That's why all of this happened, right? And that is a cause of the Great Depression, because then it led to the repossession of many people's uh, the values and goods, and then these banks would try to sell these values and goods, but then the value of these goods wouldn't be as high as they normally would, because the demand for it is lost, right? Because remember, this time was a high time for unemployment, which you'll understand why in a bit. Okay, so that was the easy credits. Basically, from all of that, you need to understand is that people would invest on the margin, and because they would invest on the margin, and because of the low economic activity of the 1929 to 1939, it led to, unfortunately, many people having to use their own money to pay back that loan, and they just couldn't afford it. The next is going to be the lack of regulatory services, or regulatory laws, I should say, in the United States. So back in 1929, banks weren't regulated. Banks had very little accountability from the U.S. government. So the U.S. government basically did not really regulate or control these banks. Of course, the government should not be controlling the banks fully, but there must be some laws in place to ensure the safety of the different people within the that are using the bank, right? The customers within the bank, right? And there needs to be some regulations to ensure the protection of these people, right? The protection of these people. But there was nothing like that. And since there is no protection for these peoples, what happens was these banks, they did not pay those people back their money. Why didn't they pay back their money? Well, these banks went bankrupt. And how did they go bankrupt? Well, here's how. So we already know that people used other people's money, the bank's money in particular, to invest. But the banks were also doing the same. For example, let's say you have a person, right? Let's say Bob. And he wants to invest, he wants to put some money into a bank account, right? Not invest. Wants to put some money into the bank account. So let's say he puts some money, all right? So that's his money, and it goes into the bank, right? That's your bank over there. It's just a house, trying to represent it. Anyways, what the bank will do with that money is it will take that money, right? The money, and it will invest it into the stock market. I'm just using the New York Stock Exchange because it's the largest one, but it puts it into a stock market, right? And once it's in the stock market, that money is no longer, remember, it's no longer that money. It could fluctuate. That money could become any amount of value depending on the price at which the stock is sold, right? So let's say you put in $20. The bank will take that money. It's like, oh, it's just going to stay here. Why not put it into some good use and make some money off of our customers' money? So they put that $20 into the New York Stock Exchange, and they expect that money to fruitfully multiply. And then in the 1920s, that's what happened. And that led to the expansion of banks. That led to many initiatives being set up in banks, which led to more people being able to access financial services. So this system could work theoretically, but there has to be some controls. And since there were no controls, this led to an uncontrollable amount of money from the banks being invested into the stock market. Therefore, there was no protection for these individuals should the stock market crash. And that's what happened. The stock market crashed and your $20 became $2. So now the bank owes you $20, right? Because in your bank account, you have put in $20, right? This is not a fault of your own. The bank decided to invest your money, right? But since they decided to invest your money, that $20 has now diluted into $2. And therefore, the bank cannot afford to pay you back the money they owe. So, for example, when you go to withdraw that money, you can only withdraw $2 of your money. And most of the time, they would straight up reject a withdrawal because they simply did not have enough funds to pay you back. And also, additionally, with all of this, many banks had to close down and they had to go into bankruptcy because of the fact that they were losing most of their money, because their money comes from the customers, right? It comes from the customers. They deposit the money into their bank, right? And then they use this bank. They use this money for redistribution, like loans, and also investing into the New York Stock Exchange, right? But now the person in this case lost its money, lost his money because of the fact that the New York Stock Exchange went down, and since it went down, the $20 lost its value, right, within that stock. So that stock is no longer $20, it became $2. So then the bank can't afford to pay him back, so they file for bankruptcy. They don't want to pay anyone back, so they just file for bankruptcy. It's not like a person who has to still pay them back or like have their things repossessed. They just file for bankruptcy. And once they file for bankruptcy, what happens is the person simply never gets his money back. That money is never going to be given back to that person. Yeah, it's crazy to me too, but to simply put it, that money will never come back because of the fact that the bank has declared bankruptcy, and their assets are basically gone, right? They've already declared bankruptcy. Therefore, they have no obligation to pay that Bob, I call him Bob, I think, his $20 back. So that $20 on paper that you have means nothing because the bank, in this theoretical scenario, only has $2, and then they called for bankruptcy. And because they called for bankruptcy, they have $0 now. They don't exist. They've been disbanded. So therefore, your $20, you've lost it. Too bad. And many people have lost their whole life savings through this whole scenario because of the fact that they would put all of their money into the bank. And then the bank did all of this, they have to get bankrupt, and therefore people lose all of their money. So now let's say you've become unemployed. We'll kind of understand where that unemployment comes from. You've just become unemployed, you're like, you know what? I have $3,000 saved in my bank account. Let me go ahead and withdraw that. Right? That's a lot of money for the 1920s to the 1930s. That's a huge amount. But now the bank invested that money, lost all of it, and then declared for bankruptcy. And because they declared for bankruptcy, they now have no obligation to pay you that money back, according to the laws. So this is why it was really important for regulations to be set to ensure the safety of people's money, right? And this is why there's now security deposits or different types of insurances within the U.S. government and even the Canadian government that ensure that you get your money back. Even if a bank fails, right, they become bankrupt, you will get your money back and you will get the full amount back on time, right, whenever you need it. Okay, and they also have regulations to ensure that the bank has a sufficient amount of money to even operate. So they're not putting all of their money into the stock market in hopes of it increasing exponentially, right? They have to have some risk management, have to have some money that is liquidated, meaning that it's actually in monetary value. It's not stuck into a stock which can fluctuate in price and change the amount of money you have, right? All right, next up, we have shrinking demands. So Canada relied heavily on trading and exporting into foreign nations. But these foreign nations also fell into the effect of less demand. There was simply less demand for goods because there is lower unemployment rates. There's higher unemployment rates. Because there's higher unemployment rates, this means that people just don't have the money to buy products from a specific economy. So for example, let's say I was working for $10 an hour, and then eventually I lose my job. Now my main priorities are going to be to feed myself and have myself have a shelter, right? I won't really care about having the latest iPhone, right? Or a MacBook, or having the Louis Vuitton or something like that. I don't care about these products. I only care about the necessities. So therefore, other businesses other than the more necessity ones like grocery, and more pharmacies and things like them, they suffered because people just didn't have the incentives to buy things, and this led to lower and lower businesses being able to operate properly. And that indirectly contributed again back into unemployment because then these businesses didn't have enough money to support themselves. So therefore they had to fire or cut their employees, so that they can keep themselves afloat because businesses don't want to become bankrupt. But again, many businesses also had to become bankrupt as well, which means that everybody is unemployed then, right? So that's also not a good outcome as well. And that does happen because then you have less demand. You don't have enough people buying into your business, so investors start losing confidence in you, and they start de-investing into your business, and then there's less people buying into your business, so you just don't have enough money to keep yourself afloat, so you just call bankruptcy. So you don't have to pay anything back. All right. Now this also kind of relates back into the exports and foreign relations. Because remember, this is talking about foreign relations. I'm talking about foreign countries in this case, and because of the fact that they were thinking this way and this is what was happening, less demands, basically a bad economy. They just didn't see it. Necessity There wasn't a necessity to be able to get products from foreign nations because of the fact that people just couldn't afford it, right? They simply put, people couldn't afford it, so there's no willingness to buy foreign products, specifically Canadian made products. And the biggest of these is going to be, the biggest loss for the Canadians is going to be from the Americans. So Canada was really good trading partners with America, right? So Canada was really good trading partners with America, but America was hit hardest by the Great Depression, right? I'm just gonna say Great GD. So they're hit really hard by the Great Depression, and that led to America ordering less from Canada. So therefore, Canada was not getting the sufficient amount of business that it really needed from the Americans, simply because of the fact that Americans were suffering. They just didn't have the means to be going to foreign nations. Again, this is going back into my last cause of the shrinking demand. They just didn't have the demand for it. The demand for it. And to even make it worse on Canada, for the economies that like the markets of different nations that still wanted to have trading relationships with Canada, there was a protective tariff imposed. All right, so there was this protective tariff that was imposed. And what does this mean? Well, this tariff is basically, just think of it as a tax. All right, it's a tax on foreign goods or exported goods that come from foreign nations, and this was imposed to protect foreign competition. So people wanted the businesses within their own country to be providing for other businesses and for their people, right? That makes sense because their people would be getting paid, and therefore their people would be able to invest more into their economy, leading to better life for everyone. So what they did to deter foreign companies is they couldn't just outright say, no, we don't want you, right? They still want to maintain good diplomacy, good foreign relationships. So what they would do is they would add a tariff. They would add an extra tax on top of every other shipment fee, every other thing that the business has to do to get to that foreign land, right? That includes maybe getting even a permit in that country. On top of all of that, you have to pay a tax for every good you sell there. And this is done to deter companies. It's literally done to basically say, Don't come here. Let the locals run our economy. Let the locals supply our businesses and supply our people, right? But this means that it also leads to businesses suffering because then there's even less options available, right? Because businesses cannot afford these tariffs, especially in the Great Depression, where they were not making sufficient revenue.